So that's a overall picture. You have the mesh file. It is basically the unstructured mesh information, that is the coordinates and the names of the cells. We have the case file. Mesh file is a subset of the case file, and it contains the mesh as well as the problem, numerical, and display settings. And you have the data file, which contains the solved quantities, the dependent variables which have been solved at each and every cell point available within the mesh, like U, V, W, and P, that is the X, Y, Z momentum per unit mass, which is basically X, Y, Z velocities, and the pressure field, the temperature, and any other species or other transport equations which you are solving. All this information is stored in the data file, and this is unique to a given case file or a mesh file. Fluent also has some other additional files. I'll speak about the journal file at a later stage, but you can see some extensions like .jou.prof, which is a profile file, or a .dpm file, which is specific to the Eulerian Lagrangian based multiphase model, in which you get some discrete particle behavior in the domain. So there are some additional files associated with ANSYS Fluent. But overall, all these files can be stored in a specific format, either as the files themselves, or you can also, in some cases, reduce the size. You can perform a very efficient memory management by just adding an extension .gz. And if you write this extension .gz and then say OK to this saving the file, in that case what you end up doing is like you compress the file. Now this .gz extension is what is valid in Windows. In GNU Linux, it's the .z or the .gz extension. So it uses different kinds of compressing capabilities so that you can reduce the size of the files that you're writing, and also reading becomes quite efficient in that case. You can write the files either as the files themselves, or by default actually Fluent always includes this the binary file format. So if you write it in a binary file, you have something like this, which you cannot really understand, but the software understands it quite well. Now this is very helpful just to give you some idea about the numbers. Let's say you have a case and a data file which takes in a size of something like 2 MB. Then in that case, writing it in the binary format can reduce it by half, that is around 1 MB. And additionally, if you write this, if you add a .gz extension in Windows, or a .z or .gz extension in GNU Linux, then you can reduce the size further by a factor of around 2. So you can do a lot of memory management in an efficient manner. You can reduce the size of the files by using the binary file and the .gz or .z extension efficiently. So all these files can be written in this format. Ultimately, after we have the results stored in terms of a case or a data file, it's always necessary that ultimately the CFD analysis should be performed, and we can do some post-processing. So the analysis has been done and we want to now analyze the results. So in that case, what we typically do is to create some surfaces or lines or some points where we can get some color plots, contour plots, some vector plots, some path lines can be viewed, or in some cases along some lines we can see the pressure profile, so we can plot some XY plots. We can also generate some histograms in terms of population of a specific value or quantity within the domain. So there are many post-processing features which are available within ANSYS Fluent. It's very helpful. And that's how the contours look like. This is just one example. So you have the contours inside and you have the vectors at the inlet in this case. More about this will be described in the post-processing lecture, how to deal with different options available in ANSYS Fluent's post-processing features. We can also get not just qualitative reports, but we can also get some quantitative reports. So in terms of fluxes, in terms of force, torque or moments, we can also get surface integrals in terms of the total value, the summation value, the area averaged value, the volume averaged value. So all these options are available for reporting options as well. And usually the reporting happens on the console window. So you can see if you want to calculate the torque on this given wall zone, and if you say print, then it gets printed out in the console window. This is something which you cannot edit, but it is something which is visible, which you can take down for your further analysis. Now, while I'm operating with ANSYS Fluent, one of the things which you would find uh, difficult to get adjusted to is how to operate on the graphics window. If you move your mouse on the graphics window, if you want to analyze your mesh or analyze your results, ultimately, you need to be familiar with how the um, different motions can be performed on the graphics window. So, for example, we just had a look at the graphics window here. So what you can see here is the overall graphics of the contour plots, and if I want to move this image around, then I need to be aware of what are the different options I have for mouse functionalities. So actually, as far as the mouse functionalities are concerned, we have this is something which we can always change. Let's say you are more comfortable with the workbench environment, you want to have the workbench defaults, you can choose that, but you can also get the fluent defaults. The fluent default is that the left click of your mouse will actually pivot the geometry. The middle mouse button, you can make a box with the middle mouse button and you can zoom into the geometry. If you make a box in a specific way, you zoom in. You can also zoom out by making the box in the opposite direction. And we have the right mouse button with which you can always probe the data at a given point. So in 2D and 3D they might have different meanings, but you can basically get familiar with them by looking at the UI of ANSYS Fluent. And this is how you can access the mouse button options. You can go to display and you can go to mouse buttons, and there you can modify the options you have in ANSYS Fluent for the different left, middle, and right click options. Let's now try to understand, after having gone through data handling and analysis, let's have a look at how customization can be done in ANSYS Fluent. So as I had described earlier, customization can be done in terms of automation, or we can add new features through some user-defined functions in ANSYS Fluent, which are basically C programming languages based codes. Some additional functions can be written, or we can also operate it together with third-party codes. So we are going to look at how this customization can be done. Actually, the automation can be done through two means in ANSYS Fluent. One is by running a script. Now that is called a journal file. So in a journal file, you can everything, if you, for example, if you go to file, write, and say start journal, in that case a file is written which you specify the name, and in that all the operations that you do on the user interface of Fluent, either graphical user interface, it gets stored as CXGUI do. This kind of prefix is added to all the steps that you do, or you, even if you write anything on the console window in terms of a TUI mode, so even those commands are stored, as you can see here on the screen here. So all these options are available and everything gets stored in the script file, and you can stop it at a later stage. The start journal becomes stop journal, and that file can be read in for further automation purposes. So you can write this journal file or the script, and you can run the script for other kinds of problems as well. Another option that ANSYS Fluent offers is the settings file. Now the settings file is something which is only possible through the text user interface. So you have to go to file and say write settings, and you give the name of the file. Let's say in this case I've written case setup. In that case, ANSYS Fluent will write all the boundary conditions, all the problem setup, and the numerical setup, all the graphic setup, everything, it will be written into this file called case setup, as I've specified the name here. And let's say you read in another mesh at a later stage which has the same boundary names, boundary types, and when you want to assign the same conditions to that new mesh file, then you can read in that settings file. So this case setup file, which I gave this name case setup, can be read in. You can just write file space read minus settings, and it will ask you for the name of the file. You have to put it within inverted commas, and you get the name of the file into the ANSYS Fluent GUI or user interface, and you read in all the settings and assign it directly without doing this hard work of setting up the problem again with the boundary conditions and solver settings. So this is very helpful as far as automation is concerned in ANSYS Fluent, something called the settings file. Earlier in the previous versions of Fluent, it was called the boundary conditions file. So they wrote read BC or write BC, but now it is called the settings file. You can also add in new features into ANSYS Fluent through something called the user-defined functions. Now the user-defined functions are categorized mainly for three purposes. So one of the purpose that you can see here is, for example, setting up the boundary conditions which are of a special type. Let's say I want to have a boundary condition which is a function of time. Then you can define such boundary conditions using a user-defined function. It is a C program and which has some keywords which are typical for ANSYS Fluent, which are known to ANSYS Fluent. So if I have to first of all have the header file include udf.h, and then ANSYS Fluent can understand things like define underscore profile, and you define a time dependent profile here. You can do a lot of mathematical operations which you would basically be able to do if you are a bit familiar with C programming language. So all these operations can be done. You can do file input and output as well. So such boundary conditions can be set up. It is very helpful in capturing some specific kind of physics. So this is part of the customization, adding new features to ANSYS Fluent. The other reason why you might use a given UDF would be for the other reason that you might consider using a user-defined function would be for, let's say, to perform some specific physics, like let's say you want to make the mesh to move or the mesh to deform. Let's say you want one wall boundary to respond to the flow induced pressure. So you can have such flow induced vibrations or deformations also taken into account for FSI applications, that is fluid structure interaction applications. So this is very helpful for doing such special kind of operations. Using a user-defined function, you can define the motion of your wall boundaries or even some other boundaries, which can be very helpful in analyzing the problem. Accordingly, the mesh can be changed as well using some inbuilt options in ANSYS Fluent for mesh deformation. And this is the other class of problems in which you might need to add some new features into ANSYS Fluent. The third category is when you want to have a different kind of treatment of some terms in your standard equations of continuity and the momentum and energy equations. So that is, let's say you want to have a special kind of drag law for your multiphase applications. In that case, you can again include the udf.h, which is the special header file which is available, which has to be included in your user-defined function. And based on this, you can define the special kind of say exchange property, how the momentum exchange takes place between the different phases, let's say a gas and a liquid phase. And these options can be included, and you can also have a customized drag law, a customized property definition, which can even be solution dependent. So it's very great feature while you can use ANSYS Fluent, that you can add this extra features through access to its user-defined functions, which is actually a customization to the existing source code. As far as interoperability is concerned, ANSYS Fluent can be operated always as a staggered solution-based approach. So you have to interact with the other software through data exchange. It's not possible to make a single matrix of the dependent variables to solve them, but we have to couple ANSYS Fluent through some kind of codes. So one of the codes which was done before the workbench came into existence was the MPCCI, which was basically a mesh-based parallel code coupling interface, which is actually a product of the Fraunhofer Institute in Germany. And what you could do is you can do a lot of FSI applications. You can make Fluent interact with a structural solver by just superposing all the pressure or other kind of stresses on the boundaries, and they can be read into different kinds of file formats which are understandable for different structural solvers, and you can do a very nice FSI study. So either as a one-way coupling, or you can also make the process repetitive through MPCCI, and you can make it a two-way coupling as well. But that all has been solved. This additional coupling requirement is solved by the introduction of the ANSYS workbench. So Fluent is now possible to be included within the workbench, so you can couple it together with ANSYS other products in terms of structural mechanics, analysis software, or the very special feature of optimization. So you can define design of experiments, and response surface can be generated, and then a goal-driven optimization can be done, and all this being coupled together with ANSYS Fluent. So you can really do a lot of design of experiments and optimization in using ANSYS Fluent in the workbench environments. In the ANSYS workbench environment, there is really a seamless integration. If you're using some other software integrators like Mode Frontier for optimization, or Radios, in your specific organization are set up in this way, then that option is also available within ANSYS Fluent. So ANSYS Fluent can be integrated with other software packages within such a workbench environment, either ANSYS Workbench or other third-party integration environments. Overall, to understand the ANSYS Fluent's capabilities, it's basically a general purpose code, and actually it's preferred to start CFD with ANSYS Fluent. That's why we are taking this course on ANSYS Fluent first of all. And it asks you for several inputs, and they really are very challenging for a user to understand the overall philosophy of CFD, to be able to use Fluent solver and post processor, which are embedded together into one single GUI, so you can analyze the results quickly on ANSYS Fluent without having a third-party post processor. And it can be operated as a standalone entity as well as within the ANSYS Workbench environment. The subsequent releases, which are coming up every 1.5 years or so in ANSYS Fluent, they try to increase the features. So more and more physics is included, making the process more quicker. So that's in terms of speed. Also, the accuracy and the robustness is something which often is being made more efficient. The subsequent releases of ANSYS Fluent basically try to enhance the features, so more and more possibilities to give in different kinds of boundary conditions, maybe parametric or time dependent boundary conditions, or even different kinds of physics that can be included. So that's about the features. Any CFD software has to be accurate enough, only then it has business in the market, and it has to be robust. It should not crash, so it should be able to handle different kinds of settings, unpredictable boundary conditions, or different kinds of problems that users might have, and it should be able to handle them efficiently without crashing, being able to report back to the user in case something has to be changed or something seems to be unphysical. And ultimately it has to be fast, because we are looking for quick solutions, because product designers are looking for quick changes to their existing product, and we are looking for high speed computing nowadays. As far as the memory efficiency is concerned, that's another concern we are having, that ANSYS Fluent is trying as much as possible to make the data transfer, the data writing and reading as quick as possible, and also to compress the data that is generated, so that you don't have to store it doesn't occupy much of the disk space. So these are different features which are getting enhanced in the subsequent releases of ANSYS Fluent, and we can look forward to it, that maybe at some stage, which is one thing which ANSYS is targeting, is to integrate everything into a single CFD code. But that's something which will be possible in maybe some years. It's not possible so quickly, but as of now, ANSYS Fluent can be operated as a standalone entity as well as within the workbench environment. Thank you very much for your attention. I think this should be able to answer to you some specific questions about how we can navigate through the ANSYS Fluent GUI and the text user interface. I'm very thankful for your attention, and I hope you enjoyed this lecture. Stay tuned for the next ones which are coming up.